And let's go. Okay, so hello and welcome to another edition of the Hold the Lane podcast. I'm joined here by two wonderful guests and my co-host, as always, Colin. But first, let me introduce you real quick to my guests. Many of you probably know from the analysis desk, from CSGO tournaments, and also from his content and written, and now also on YouTube for a while. Duncan Thooorin Shields, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Alright, and also we're joined by esports lawyer Bryce Blum. And also, how are you doing today, my friends?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's great. And also you, Colin, what's on your heart? Feeling well after the TSM loss yesterday?
It's always a good day when TSM loses and you get to enjoy some fanboy salt, but we're not here to talk about that today.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Because
it's good to be here.
We're joined here to talk about the franchising debacle that was going around now for weeks and months, but a few weeks ago there was an article by Slingshot Esports where it was stating about a leaked document from LCS owners that sent a letter to Riot Games, and we're gonna talk and discuss about all the concerns and problems that those owners are having. Is franchising the right thing for esports? But before we get into the whole thing and the whole letter, I would like to know like a quick overview, like quick thoughts from you guys. Are you pro or contra franchising?
One of the guests.
Who
I guess,
would like to start?
Sure, I guess I'll go first. So I should open with the obvious caveat here, right? Which is that through my legal practice, I work with 7 of the 10 North American LCS teams. So I bring that bias to the table. Obviously, this was a letter that was signed by a lot of clients of mine, and while I'm not here, obviously, to be their spokesperson in any way, my thoughts are entirely my own as someone who works throughout the industry, not just as a lawyer, but as a consultant. I still have to put that out there because it's a bias that people should be aware of.
Totally.
As a general rule, I'm pro franchising.
Okay.
I think that when you look at the economics of not just an esports league, but an esports league, they can be a lot more stable through franchising. And when people draw comparisons to some of the European leagues that do promotion relegation systems, I think there's some pretty key distinctions about how far along they are, what kind of protection they give to teams that are in fact relegated out. And I think overall, on balance, at least if we're just talking about the LCS, I think that ecosystem would benefit from having more stability rather than less. So that's the short answer, although it's obviously a very complex issue, and the devil's really in the details.
All right. What are your quick thoughts on it, Thorin?
It all really depends how you define what all the subjective terms are within that sentence. Like, what is better? What is good for esports? People just say these terms without ever defining what they mean by that. So personally, I don't think that as a model is good for esports, because I view esports as a competitive discipline to find and showcase matches between the best competitors in the world in a video game. So I do not think that having a franchise system provides the best framework for that to occur, because it obviously immediately limits who can compete within certain leagues, how leagues are controlled, how transfers will then be precipitated between teams, because there is not a scenario where a team can just come straight into a league. So I think on the terms of esports as a competitive discipline, I think it's almost overwhelmingly provable that this would not enhance competition.
Okay. Colin, do you want to also add your quick thoughts the franchising?
Yeah, so when it comes down to the franchising element, I think that from an economic standpoint, it could be good for esports, namely within the League of Legends scene, just because so many of the team owners have been strained to make money back. They don't have like any access to the broadcasting revenue, and they've been operating in the red for the past year, ever since venture capitalists have come in. So within that regard, I think that there is some potential, if it's executed correctly, to help out with some of the economics and some of the scenes. I think League of Legends is a very different case from other scenes like Overwatch and CSGO in terms of operation management, as well as just the structure of the scenes. You know, Overwatch, CSGO, they have open circuits and things like that, so franchises aren't necessarily they're never really required, but they're also not in the sense of processing this one. They're not going to be something I think is going to be really called up on, unless like the developer like Blizzard is pushing it in Overwatch's case. I do agree with Thooorin's sentiment that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good for the competition side of things, but economically I think there's some potential there to help stabilize a couple of scenes that perhaps need it. But again, the devil is in the details throughout it, and it's something that it's going to be taken by a case-by-case sort of thing, but it isn't just like inherently like, oh yes, we must do this throughout esports.
All right, so obviously there comes the first question in mind. Why are there the concerns, basically? Because we had like several LCS owners sending a letter to Riot asking for a lot of things, and two of the things mentioned obviously were the relegation and revenue stream problems. And also the pledge and they asking literally to become a franchise throughout the next year until Riot decided if they are gonna go into a franchise model or not. So basically, I want to start this discussion off. I want to highlight the concerns that the teams are having, and then looking into Riot's point of view. Like, try to understand why are there the concerns. So basically, one of the first concerns that comes to mind for me would be the relegation thing. Relegation has been a lot of problems for many owners, and since like the Cloud9 Challenger team qualified to the LCS for next split, came again to the public, and people start talking and discussing about it. Is the Challenger scene currently healthy? Is relegation really needed? Or do we really need the relegation, and so we can have like actually proper investments? So Bryce, you work with the teams, so probably you have you understand like how they are feeling, or how problematic this can be to have a relegation system. Would you like to explain a bit for someone that is not working in the field?
Sure, and again, I won't talk to how they're feeling, right, because that's their perspective, and I'm not here as their representative, but I'm happy to kind of talk to the macro status of the ecosystem and what it means to be a team in the LCS in 2016. So it's not fair to say that with relegation there will not be serious investment, because obviously that's been proven factually inaccurate, right? Like the 76ers have come in, Peter Guber and Ted Leonsis have come in. You've seen the Immortals and Energy teams that have, and Echo Fox that have taken on, or that were built from outside capital, right, from some pretty serious investors. So there's no doubt, right, that money will come into the scene even if there is relegation, but it creates a significantly less stable environment. And what that means is people are less bullish on the space. The value of the position is less than it would be if there was more stability, and that has all sorts of trickle down impacts, right? Like sponsors are worried about what happens if a team gets relegated. The team itself is worried about what happens if they get relegated. There's no doubt that when you fall from the LCS to the Challenger Series, there's a massive economic impact on how many eyeballs are on the team, and therefore how much money can be generated from that team itself. And that's true in, for example, the English Premier League, right, where only the top 20 teams within the English Football Association are actually in the Premier League, and that comes with significantly better TV deals, media, so way more money made off of media rights, way more money made off of sponsorships. You sell out games more often, etc., right? But it's worth noting that when you get relegated from one of these leagues, there's actually a parachute payment where the league is actually paying out in order to keep you afloat, given the fact that you're going to have inflated salaries of players, and there are all these hard costs associated with operating in this ecosystem. And all of a sudden, when there is this jarring moment within the rules that takes your economics, your revenue generation from here to here, that can have a catastrophic impact on your business. So that's what these teams are asking about, and it goes, and their problems are deeper, right? This is just focusing on the franchising issue, but if you read the letter, right, which I would encourage everyone to do, it includes articulation of the fact that all of these teams, assigned by 19 of 20 LCS teams, say that they're losing money, right? That they're not making money off of League of Legends esports, and that they think franchising is one way of helping curb that issue. And obviously, Riot Games is making a ton of money, and so they want it to be more balanced economics. And I think that's a fairly safe overview of the situation.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it. I want first to talk about the revenue problem, because I think the one comes with the another.
Are we skipping past the relegation part?
No, we're not.
Okay.
Because you mentioned right now the sponsors are having a lot of issues and problems are ongoing. The sponsor teams, because of certain kinds of relegation. Also, there's no parachute investment. As I know from soccer here in Germany, the Bundesliga provides a team that is getting relegated a certain kind of amount of money. If they really so they can restructure basically. So is the revenue problem like leading to the relegation problem, or are those two things that should be handled separately here?
There is no revenue problem, right? The costs to have an LCS team is you must be able to afford a house, flights to the event, you must be able to pay your players, that's it. Now, you can do that, absolutely. The sponsors pay more than enough to do that. In fact, forget merchandising and revenue sharing. You don't need any of those things to do that. The reason there is a revenue problem is because people have decided to spend more than they are making, and they have spent all that they are making, and they now get relegated. And then they say, oh, I can't get more money. Now, in this scenario, you created the problem yourself. So here's what's funny. The same people who made this letter, if they want to solve their problem tomorrow, the quickest way they could solve it would not be for Riot to create some unseen revenue sharing model, to get $1 billion TV contract, to take away relegation. The simplest thing they could do tomorrow is put some kind of a salary cap on what you can make. If that's what the people who are the team owners really want, they would instantly put a salary cap to stop people who are taking in investment, which they do not have to justify in any way other than giving up equity in their company. So based on a fictional valuation, this is what is driving salaries up, which is why this person then complains they have a revenue problem. They do not have any revenue problem. How is it a revenue problem for me to make $10,000 a year and then spend it all on pairs of Yeezys and then say, oh, well, there should be some sort of like new revenue so that I can have more Yeezys? So, well, no, in that scenario, it doesn't justify it, does it? And why have I got Yeezys? Because my friend who has more money than me has some Yeezys. Well, guess what? He has more money than you. I don't really understand. This is why I say you have to break down every discussion before you have the discussion into what the definitions are. Like, for example, in terms of the relegation one, I'll just quickly touch on that because I assume we'll get to it in a minute, so I'll set up what I think on that. So when people say things that I think are disingenuous, like there's a lack of job security. Yeah, there is sort of a lack of job security in whether or not you can be ranked like top 8 in the best teams in an entire region, probably based on whether you're top 8 or not. It's almost like a competition, not really like a job, you know. But even in a job, I believe if I do a bad job and someone else is better qualified, usually they get hired, right? There's no actual job security in real life if you're bad at your job. So you can see what I mean. Like in general, that's going to be the way I'm going to frame most of these discussions, is that the problem with reading that letter is that it's like going off into a sci-fi world where you have to accept all their premises. And then, yeah, once they've created their premises, they've not bothered to look at how the problems were created. Then, yeah, they're totally right. There are all these problems and there's only, oh, what do you know? There's only this one solution that Jack from Cloud9 has figured out. Oh, what a genius. What he doesn't bother mentioning is, why were you ever in that position, Jack? Why were you all in this situation? And does what you're suggesting even solve any problems? Like, to make an assertion, you normally have to provide proof for it. You have to provide studies, some sort of expert opinion. They did none of that. They've made a lot of assertions, and now people are going the other way. So what concerns do you have about it? Well, no, the other way around. You have to show that there's anything valid, that this is a solution. I don't have to be concerned or prove you wrong. You have yet to prove yourself right, you know.
Yeah, well, this is okay, but that's just based on this one leaked letter, right, which is like 3 pages long. It's bullet points. That would assume that they've never had any conversations behind the scenes. There's never been hour-long meetings in which all those discussions about what is really the root cause of the problem, right?
Didn't you just say that you can't comment on anything that was said to you from those teams, yet you want us to speculate on conversations we don't know that did or didn't happen?
So I'm saying you are making the assumption that this is the only communication that has happened. I'm saying it is possible that other communications have happened, and just so we're clear, I haven't been in on those conversations. I'm not saying, hey, look, I was down in LA 2 weeks ago, and I was in a meeting with all the LCS owners and with Waylon Roselle and all the folks at Riot Esports had this conversation. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is the fact that this specific letter does not contain all of the background story and all of that conversation doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, right? That's all I'm saying right now.
So, but still, we have to.
So you've yet to make any assertion or any point then.
No. I'm just.
You're just here to remind us all, like, epistemologically, what is possible for a human to know.
No. Okay, so then let me make some concrete points. Okay, so first of all, you made the point that the fastest way for the teams to solve this supposed revenue problem would be for them all to get together and set a salary cap. The problem with that was
Riot to do that.
for Riot to do that. Okay. Well, the problem with that is it would be a massive antitrust violation, no matter who's setting it up, right? If the team set it up themselves, if they privately got together and said, hey guys, no one's going to pay a player more than $300,000 a year, or if the Riot said, hey, we're going to set this as a salary cap, it would be a violation of U.S. antitrust law. So that's not really going to work, right? Like the way in which traditional sports leagues in the U.S. get around those regulations is by establishing collective bargaining and having collective bargaining agreement that establishes a sub unit, right? So antitrust is all about defining the scope of who controls the market, who participates, and how all of that plays out. And sports have established some exemptions to typical antitrust law, so you can do things like set salary caps, which you traditionally can't do in macro businesses or in industries, right? Because people are opting into and getting concessions in exchange.
Not fall under antitrust law since it limits the number of teams that can compete within that region.
So just so we're saying, I'm not saying that it's not, right?
I'm just asking, surely the same logic would follow with LCS itself, limiting the number of teams.
So the answer is because you can limit the number of people that are participating, but limiting the actual economics around that is a totally separate issue.
Okay.
But that's you've just gotten to exactly the follow-on of why they wouldn't want to do what I just suggested there. I was suggesting that as a general solution. Now, the reason why Cloud9 don't want that is the last thing they want is collective bargaining with their players and all players from around the league, and players to have direct say and power, leverage power, which obviously goes to boycotts and walkouts, etc., over how much salary everyone makes. Because then the players can do the same thing to the teams that the teams are now trying to do with Riot, which is say, we will all band together and we want to leverage our power against you to get more of the revenue share. That is exactly what collective bargaining would do to the teams.
No, I don't think that it's true, actually. I think that it's easy to make that assumption based on how traditional sports collective bargaining have played out, because the teams actually own the league, and so it's really a two-party system, right? It's players on one side, teams/league on the other. I think when collective bargaining plays out in esports, it's far more likely that players and teams are a unit against Riot, right? And if we're just looking at League of Legends, because their interest, while there are moments, right, where the player says, hey, team, pay me more money, overall, on a macro level, you've got Riot, which is controlling a number of the revenue streams, and teams/players saying we want some, right? Just look at, for example, the media rights deal that was leaked last week, right, where a number of different people were reporting, Richard Lewis and Sports Business Journal were reporting that Riot is close to signing a media rights deal. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it's the reported number is $90 million a year. There's nothing in place that would get either the players or the teams assent from that media rights deal. So when we're talking about collective bargaining in League of Legends, it's the talent, the teams, and the players that want and probably deserve some share of that. So no, I don't think it's true at all that the team's worst fear is that the players will wind up organizing and turning into some collective bargaining unit. And maybe it winds up being three-party bargaining, right, where you have you have players as one.
I don't understand what you've just said right there. So wait a minute. Just because, what you constantly seem to do is when someone makes a general point, you say that because right now the specific thing that would be done is this, that is not true. Like you're basically, as far as I can tell, just using pragmatism to suggest that the other thing cannot have any factual basis.
I'm not sure I'm following you. So I didn't say that it has no factual basis.
So the fact that at the moment the most obvious thing that would happen, because players do not unionize, is that it would be the players and the team, because for a start off, a team basically represents players as an agent already in their current capacity. They would be the united principle against the league.
Yeah.
So why does that suggest that players would not ever unionize against the team and that teams have no issue with them unionize against them?
I was literally just making the follow-up point that at some point I could easily see it turning into a three-party bargaining system where you have the teams as an independent entity, you have the players as an independent bargaining entity, and you've got the leagues, Riot as an independent bargaining entity. So I absolutely think we could evolve there. I just don't think that it's true to say that right now, as these negotiations are happening, the team's worst fear is that the players get organized and somehow bargain against them. I
definitely never said that right now in this particular situation that is the team's worst fear.
No. That's right. But would this even be possible on a system right now or in the future? Because so far we have the all intellectual property. Let's take an example, Riot Games. So basically they could decide that. Right now we have the slots, the 10 LCS slots, and obviously the Challenger Series slots. Would we need to change the system, remove relegations, go into the franchise system to make this possible, or would this just be Riot decides we need to change the system to make this bargain happen?
I don't really understand the question. Can you rephrase it?
So basically, to make the bargain between players and teams with Riot possible, would they need to change the system where we get back to the actual point? Like,
I think that's a side topic. We've gone down a digression there. Like, the original point was basically the one about... It wasn't about relegation. It was the one before that. So what was it about? Something to do with sponsors and revenue.
It was revenue first, yeah.
Okay. And so what is the primary contention there? That at the moment, teams can't get enough revenue, and that's why... And then a separate issue, relegation is a solution.
Yeah.
Removing relegation is a solution to the revenue issue.
Exactly. So that's what I want to talk about now. So basically, since a lot of the points concerning owners and many say that one of the problems because of getting relegated removes all sponsorship deals. Do we need wouldn't Riot necessarily, like you already mentioned before, Thooorin, to make something new happen, or it's just like the easy way out, like making the relegation go away, so like the 10 LCS teams that are currently in there have their safe slots, they start like the franchise, and they are all safe and set for the next few years. Is there like a problem in like just managing the organizations and how they handle their money, or is they just willing to make more money?
So this is where I think they conflate many different issues together and then just only offer their solution, which is they say, again, like, this will make it harder for us to get sponsors if we are relegated. Well, the first thing I would do as a simple solution to if teams that are good are somehow getting relegated and have done great business is I would try and strengthen the format of the league so that it's very unlikely that bad teams will get relegated. Now, I actually think LCS to some degree has already done that. I mean, with the number of best of threes you played last split, I think you'd have a very, very hard time showing me that any of the teams that were even in relegation actually are so good and have done such good business in any context or were competitive enough that they should remain up. This is where I actually think that the owners are incredibly disingenuous, because what they want to do with the franchise system is they want to say, right, well, right now I'm an LCS, so lock the door, keep me in LCS, and I want to run like that from now on. Even though some of them, like I'll give you an example. So CLG was a much more successful organization than Quantic was, but CLG was up for relegation in the same relegation that Quantic got in and became Cloud9 and became one of the best teams. Yeah. So we can already see that even in that system, a team that was in no way going to be an LCS actually had a better team at the time than CLG did. Now both actually, one got qualified and one stayed in anyway. But in this scenario, by the arguments being presented now, there should have never been relegation. Quantic should never have been able to get in the league, and instead CLG should have just retained their spot no matter what they did, no matter what. Now that's obviously a scenario of a worse format, sure, and they've improved the format. I would agree on that sense, but that's the point. You take the problem and then you ask what are the solutions. You don't just accept their solution, you know. So my problem with it is I don't even accept the initial premise. Like, I could certainly see that if you drop out of LCS, you will not be able to re-up some of those sponsorships, or perhaps someone that you had a current deal with will be like, oh, I'm not going to increase it next year. This certainly makes sense. But my problem with that is I don't really understand why, if you were one of the worst teams in LCS, you should get that sponsorship. Logically, wouldn't it make more sense for someone who's in LCS to get that sponsorship? That's the part where I don't really follow the argument as to why that's like, we can all agree that's like a universal bad thing, you know?
Sure, but so this goes to really like the heart of the issue, right? Is that to return to the point that you're making earlier about whether or not there's actually a revenue problem, right? What you have economics that have been put in place by Riot, and if you want to actually combat those economics, creating stability of the parties on the other side, right, and creating incentives to have a higher level professional investment so that they can organize, they can treat their players better, they can pay their players more, right, and then they can actually leverage that, you know, some of the political capital they're obtaining to get better economics passed down through the league itself, right? And this is the point. No one is sitting here saying that if the teams were to pay players, you know, all a small salary, right, that there would not be enough sponsorship revenue out there to, you know, outstrip those costs and that they could make money off of League of Legends. What they're saying is, based on how much revenue Riot Games is generating off the game League of Legends and how much promotional value the LCS and other esports leagues are providing, we should be participating in some of that economic upside. So the amount of money that we are spending right now, we should be able to outstrip that in revenue. And if you were to give us our fair share of the revenue that's being generated off of our work, then we would, right? That's the argument.
Here's the problem, Bryce. That is a totally separate argument to whether relegation should exist or not. Like, for example, here's an obvious solution. Have revenue sharing for the season you are in LCS. When you get relegated, someone else comes up, they get revenue sharing. So that's another example of where they only provide one solution, or they only ask for one at least. Again, we don't know what, in theory, could be floated here. So they're only asking for one solution. The problem is, I don't think there's a very direct causal link between them not getting revenue and them getting relegated, you know.
I think it is. So I agree that it's not a direct causal link. I think it's all interrelated sets of issues around, and that's why I think we're a lot of the public debate around this, and we even have here so far talked a lot about just the franchising piece of it, which is one part of the broader pie, which is you're trying to create an ecosystem, right, that is stable and incentivizes the type of investment that we want to see, not just in like, okay, so now we've got Peter Guber behind Liquid, which is great because he can open doors to mainstream sponsors and he can up merchandising and all this stuff, and it's higher profile and it's going to, in theory, lead to other people doing the same thing. It's also about the investment that when you're in the league you make. You can spend additional money and say, I'm going to be in this league long term, and so I can spend extra money, I can build out my infrastructure, right, and I can try to get something in place that is going to be competitive long term. And they need the financial flexibility to be able to do that. And so what they're saying, what their argument is, and I'm not saying that, look, there are multiple successful leagues around the world that don't have some kind of franchising or permanency in the teams that are participating. I think there are actually reasonable arguments on both sides of this debate, but what they're saying is, we need you to create stability for us to be able to make the type of investment into our teams, our brands, and the promotion thereof that will ultimately benefit the league, the players, and everybody, right? That's what they're saying. And so that's where the relegation piece directly impacts the revenue piece.
Okay, but that sentence you just said there was incredibly loaded. It will ultimately benefit the teams, the players, and everyone. Well, for example, it does not benefit teams who now cannot be promoted.
Sure.
So
it does not benefit the best. Let's say Faker tomorrow, the NA Faker, is actually on a challenger team and they now make franchising. He now cannot stay on that team. He can only go and join a team. I mean, I can already see now, again, we've also limited the number of slots that there are and the number of people who can be paid the top salary. Like, it definitely benefits the team in question, who is in the franchise. It probably benefits their player. That you could probably go that far. Whether it benefits everyone, which, by the way, is probably how they would explain it, because you notice they never do just make it like, this would benefit my team and the teams in this union. They say it would benefit esports, like this massive nebulous term, which is like, you just can't even say statements like that. Like, as soon as someone says that, like, I just assume that's rhetoric and you're talking to the mainstream media. Like, don't say that to someone who's in esports, you know?
Yeah, so that's fair. So let's unpack it more, right? So the NA Fakers on the challenger team, right? To your point earlier about like the cream will rise. There's just like with the NBA being a franchise model, the best players are going to get the opportunity. There's no world in which in some kind of franchise model for the LCS, the best players are not going to, right? Because they're going to be good enough. So there's going to be multiple teams who want to sign them, right? For the teams that are on the outside, and this goes back to the point that you're making earlier, right? There's no doubt that the LCS benefited from having relegation system as it was going through growing pains,
does.
Right?
It still does. This is the point, Bryce, is that if these people, if their money they were investing was so well spent, it actually wouldn't be a problem anymore. Because what the great thing is, every split, you have teams come up who go on to become very successful. Unicorns of Love just won IEM, mate. They only got in season 5.
No, I agree. But this is the assumption that's underlying your arguments, right? Which is that if someone is good, then they will immediately come into the ecosystem and start spending their money well, and then they will do well competitively, and then it will all work out as it's supposed to work out.
I mean, that's not the assumption. That's just the way that generally it would work in business, because business is competition as well. Like, I'll give you an example, Bryce.
Sure.
The only team I can think of who was in a relegation situation, who did spend millions and millions, and in theory got some good players, is NRG. And I would not tell you that the reason NRG are being relegated is because of the system that's in place from Riot or the format or something to do with like lack of revenue sharing. The reason they are getting relegated, I'll tell you from my own personal speculation, is they got very poor advice on where to invest that money and who to get onto their team. So that's actually a scenario where I don't see what that has to do with Riot or the revenue system or relegation.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think it's ultimately good for League of Legends esports to have NRG?
Defined good.
So, do you think that the ecosystem of League of Legends esports benefits from having a higher level of professionalism among the ownership groups, the higher profile people, et cetera? Do you think there are net benefits that come from that in comparison to, I don't know, insert random challenger team that doesn't have Shaq and A-Rod and the owners of the Sacramento Kings, et cetera? Do you think that there are benefits that come from having an Energy versus insert random lower profile esports team here?
Benefits to who? Just the ecosystem, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, in any benefits. Do you think there's any advantages whatsoever for any party that touches the ecosystem?
I think it certainly helps the players that play for that team. They'll get paid more money, and they might have a wider fan base. I think that's an obvious benefit. It's hard to argue against that. Problem is, again, in this scenario, I don't really see why the fact that like Shaq's investing means that like this team should be in LCS over the team that's better than them and would beat them. That's my problem. I would say to Shaq, go and invest in a team that's really good, mate.
So I'm trying to unpack this a little bit, like, and go through the steps, right? So okay, so we would agree that there's probably some benefits for the players because they're going to get paid more. They're also probably going to have more support staff, better support staff, more professionalism around them, right? In theory, right? There's an Energy is more likely to have some of those things than insert random esports team here. Okay, the league itself probably benefits because when there are media stories or whatever, people are going to say, they're going to write articles about it. Shaq's going to be tweeting about it. It's going to create buzz and connectivity to an audience we might not otherwise reach, right? So these are just a few of the benefits that we can come up with off the top of our heads.
But here's the big problem, Bryce. You know a team called G2 Esports?
Sure.
Yeah, they were promoted, mate, and they have all these things that you're talking about right now.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
No, so the problem is you set up a scenario in which I can only either have NRG, failing team, massive investment, great support staff, professionalism, or I can have insert random challenger team, presumption being, and this is what would be in square brackets in your statement, does not get any of those things, will not get any of those things.
No.
Otherwise, what would the argument be? Which would I rather have? A better team with all the same things or one that's worse? That's surely not your argument, right?
No, the argument is that in the one case you get those things, in the other case you might get those things, and we don't know.
But why would it be you might?
Why wouldn't it be a might? How can you guarantee that
NRG themselves? Well, how did NRG themselves get it made? They aren't an original team.
Right, yeah.
They were Team 8.
Right, no, but it was an entirely independent group of people who came in and said, we're going to start an esports.
So why can't that happen with this brand new, really good challenger team that comes in? I still don't understand the premise here.
No, it can happen. It's just not guaranteed to happen. We have no idea.
Yeah, but
in this scenario, if we always double down on what currently exists, then how are we ever going to get anything else?
Well, so there's
you guys here are the ones saying that there's not enough revenue. So you want to create a scenario in which there's more revenue. Relegation doesn't have to be it. Therefore, go ahead. I'll give you the keys to the kingdom. Create more revenue, and then that revenue will go into the good teams. Problem solved.
Okay, but no. But wait a second. So as someone who talks to a number of the traditional sports teams and investors, right, that are thinking about getting into esports, right, and are thinking about investing in a team.
Sure.
When you have that conversation with them and you ask them, okay, so you see the upside. What's the downside? What are you afraid of? Yep. Without fail, this is part of what they're afraid of, right? And it's not that some of them will.
Sure.
Yeah, of course it makes sense. And it's not that none of them will come in if the system continues as it is. It's that we might get more of them. There might be more money coming in, more high profile if you create that stability. Maybe in the long run, the ecosystem benefits more from having an Energy, right, and giving them the opportunity to learn, or a Schalke or whoever, to learn from their mistakes and grow, than it does by having a capitalist structure where it's just, hey, how did you do?
Yeah,
you
that's
didn't do
why
well,
you've made the term ecosystem. Because if ecosystem means how much money's in the scene and how much fame is in the scene and how much that grows, that is not esports to me. That is an accoutrement of esports. That is something that goes around esports and facilitates it. Now, I'll tell you what, Bryce, if you want to tell all these teams that will have the most successful sport in the world, what we'll do is, it'll be like the WWE. We'll pick the teams that go to the playoffs. TSM will always be in the playoffs. I'll pick the matchups. I'll give TSM a good first-round matchup, then they'll play CLG in the semis. Now, guess what? It's now worth your money to invest more into TSM and CLG. They are absolutely going to make the run, and people will get to see them, and the fan base will then. There'll be a better, healthier relationship between fans. You see what I mean? That would help the ecosystem.
It's a fun hypothetical, but it's
no. I'm not being silly here. That's as ridiculous to me as your scenario of let's prop up losing teams just because it means that there will be a bigger ecosystem. I've just also given a ridiculous scenario that props up losing teams that allows you a scenario.
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally get where you're coming from. Like, for you, the only thing that matters is
I'll just make this statement, okay, and then you can respond, okay. I will put it like this, okay. I am fully aware that people who want to invest don't like the fact that they could lose. That's not overriding all other issues to me, though, okay? Like, I'm very well aware that they're scared and that they don't like the idea, but that's not really a concern for me. So,
right.
I'm just making that statement clear.
Yeah, no, I get it. But so here's my thing though. You're a big NBA fan, right? The NBA has a lot of the infrastructure in place that we're talking about adopting for esports. Okay. As a fan of watching the best basketball on the planet, does the fact that there is a franchise system do you think that it meaningfully diminishes your enjoyment of watching the NBA? Do you wish the NBA did not have a franchise-based system? Do you think that the competitive viewing experience is awful because there is franchising?
I mean, I don't really understand what the connection of that would be to this discussion about whether esports should have franchising. Because you're asking me, a viewer who's not involved in the industry of esports, whether I enjoy as a pastime watching the odd NBA game. And I don't really see what the connection would be there. Again, now you're arguing, as far as I can tell, that it makes for a more enjoyable viewing product.
No. No. Just so no. I think that where I'm losing you is that it seems to be that your argument is that the product that's created in a franchise model is drastically worse than the product that's created.
Well, here's the problem, Bryce. We'd probably need to be able to run that experiment. Like, let's maybe have the NBA exist for about 60 to 70 years in an open circuit model with relegation and promotion, and then you could probably, in an honest manner, compare whether or not it did actually benefit the product or not. Because right now, no, I can't. Actually, I mean, it's basically impossible, right?
Yeah.
All you're basically asking... I mean, I'm not being facetious when I say this, but all you're essentially asking me is, do you enjoy the NBA? Yes. In which case, the corollary in some vague way is like, step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 4, then probably franchising for LCS?
No. I think.
How do you make the leap?
Yeah. So the leap is going on, right? And there's a ton of argument going on in the public sphere around. If you create this permanency, somehow the level of competition is going to be worse, right? That the competitive product itself is going to be worse. And in fact, in the way that you defined the conversation of what is esports, right? It seemed to me that your suggestion was it's all about just having the best competitive video games being played, period.
I think I know what your point is now. Yeah. I agree, right? Here's the point, that you're making is that my implication is that the product will be worse, essentially, if you lock out other teams and you just make it their franchise model. So what you're doing is you're showing the best basketball league, the NBA, has a fantastic product, which I'm sure many people would agree upon. The problem with that is that immediately becomes an unfair example, because to have an NBA franchise, there's no challenge at NBA franchise, even if they had a system, mate, because no one has millions and millions, and no one could ever put together a team in a challenger franchise in the NBA, just below it, that would actually successfully win a best of 7 against even the worst NBA franchise. The problem in this scenario is, Bryce, you know right now that does, can, and will happen in esports if franchising is not implemented. So there's my issue essentially with the analogy. Okay. I understand the point of the analogy, sure.
So at some point, a league can get to a phase where it could make sense to have that kind of stability, and then in the early days, it doesn't make sense.
That's what I would agree with, by the way. Maybe 10 years down the line, when we are talking billions and billions, and it's not even logistically feasible.
Sure.
That's one of the points I made about the Cloud9 example. Cloud9 want all the pie for themselves now because they're in the door. But beforehand, when they're not, they still want access to the clubhouse, as it were. So that's my problem there, is that they're presenting it in your world like this, as though we can get millions and millions. Listen, like, guys, just trust us, do this, and there'll be more and more money for everyone. And like you're saying here, we'll take care of the players who are the up-and-coming players. They'll join our teams and have better support. That all sounds great, but they actually haven't yet shown that they can deliver on it. Because guess what? In the competitive discipline, they can't. They do. The NRGs of the world do get relegated, etc. Sure. You are in this scenario. So at the moment, I agree, but I think there's still a gap to where that is the case, where they would have the compelling case there.
Sure, and so we're not actually that far apart here. Really, it's just a line drawing exercise. I mean, at the end of the day, the argument that the teams are making is that they think that moment is now, and you're saying it's not now; it's a decade from now, right? Okay. And that's what really that's the crux of this debate. Because you look at, for example, where the MLS is right now in the U.S. It is in similar early days as a professional league to where the NBA was 50 years ago or baseball was 80 years ago. And so the point is, so what that means is you can get a moment where the LCS is founded, and then my Sounders, which was kind of the local professional Seattle soccer team, it ultimately wound up getting into the league because they were still in an open process where there was some kind of qualification going on, and they wound up being very successful. They've done very well competitively. They make the playoffs almost every year, though they don't win. They sell out every game. They have the highest average attendance in the MLS. So I think everyone would agree that the MLS is in that transition phase too. Maybe it's at to the point where it should be that level of stability, right? I don't know, but I guess the idea here is there does come a time in which it does make sense to have that level of permanency, or which it could, right? And not that every league needs to do this.
I mean,
don't think
the obvious problem is you do get outliers like Leicester City who will get in and might actually win the league after being promoted. So, I mean, here's the thing. I don't think that's an argument against franchising, even though obviously there isn't in European soccer. It's just that, I would put it like this. The reasons in favor of franchising for everyone except the teams and the players who are on those teams right now are not as compelling as they might otherwise seem if you listened to the debate from those owners. That's why they always make it. Like, here's the thing. Logically, Bryce, if it was such a great thing for the league to have those teams in and for those teams to do really well, that's the only way you'd make the argument. You wouldn't need to make any other argument. You wouldn't make some vague argument that will help ecosystem and esports. No, it'll make these teams better. Our teams are the product, therefore this is better, right? The problem is if they make that case, Bryce, they'll run into the problems I'm bringing up, which is like, but your product is not better. Here is a team that will get promoted, beat you, become the champion of the league, win 2 LCS and go to Worlds. You will not. And in that scenario, they at the moment don't have any answer to that.
But see, that argument is always true, though, Thooorin, right? Like
because in the NBA example, there are not teams that have the $50 million payroll that could beat the 76ers in a best of 7 and get into the NBA.
But the equivalent is English Premier League soccer, and it is Leicester City, right? Like, that is the analogy. It's in.
But the funny thing is, they didn't have the money, mate. That's why they're the outlier. You know?
I know they are the outlier. I totally agree. But my point is, no matter what, as long you could always have a promotion relegation system and always have the potential for some team that spends way less money to punch above its weight and make some crazy run.
Here's the simple way to answer that. I agree. The potential could be there for the outlier, but I'm talking about the general case. And at the moment, the general case is that teams do get in to LCS. Some of them, by the way, like the G2 Esports, for example, have as much money as the people they're even replacing. Like if Giants get, like here's an example, okay? The problem is when you keep it in NALCS where everyone has money. Why the fuck should G2 not be allowed to get into LCS, but Giants should be able to stay in? Which one's got more money? Which one's got better backing? In this world, it's actually the franchise team that would be in the worst position, but you won't allow them in because you franchise too much. You lock the door. Here's the key thing as well. Once franchising happens, you cannot put that genie back in the bottle. They're not going to open it up again, you know. So that's why I have to make these statements in a very extreme manner now, because you cannot simply go, let's try it out for a while and then go back. It's not going to happen, is it?
So basically, the problem is not whether there should be a change in the system or there's a revenue problem. Basically, what we have right now...
it is for some people. That's certainly the opinion of some people.
So let's talk about the competitive side here, because I think we came to a point where it's clear we could change in any point in time the revenue changing system, so it's better for teams. But there's still the big question: are the teams ready for it yet, which will come later? Because I want to talk. What's actually then the real problem here? Because if the owners are fearing the relegation, they're fearing loss of sponsorships and losing revenue that is so important to them, or actually making more money. So what is actually the problem? Is it the relegation itself? Is it the league formats? Or is it just because the Challenger series right now in League of Legends is just not well structured for it?
Like, here's what I would say, okay? I'll just put a statement pretty quickly, okay? Just to unpack what you said there. I don't think that Cloud9 is actually afraid of being relegated. What I think Cloud9 is afraid of is that Cloud9 does not have massive investment like some other teams do. So they're worried that they have to spend all of their money on salaries just to get a team good enough to ensure they don't get relegated and therefore be able to operate in business. So by locking the door to relegation, they just don't have to worry about that anymore. That still doesn't solve their problem of revenue, getting more money, beating the Immortals of the world. It just takes away their big fear, which is like that they have to at the moment go like hell for leather just to tread water, as it were.
So
Right.
What you basically said right now is they're just not willing to invest more so they can get better, so they can keep.
No, they don't. They don't have more money, mate. That's the problem. Yeah. Cloud9 and the other companies like that do not have the big investment. Therefore, they don't. So what happens is the simple version is NRG, Echo Fox. These teams come in who have massive Immortals, have massive amounts of investment. They pay the players more, perhaps, than a Cloud9 player. Cloud9 now has to either pay similar amounts, or just lose the player potentially. And they have to spend a lot themselves, in theory, assuming you have to spend a lot to have a competitive roster that can win as much, which obviously is not necessarily directly the case, but in general will be a fairly solid principle. So they have to spend all of their money. And so, okay, here's the simplest way to put it. Nearly all NALCS teams are running at a loss in League of Legends.
And what about the ULCS teams? Are they not?
I mean, they barely pay the players, mate. So again, they've solved the problem. Like I said initially, you just don't pay people as much, and then you can't have a revenue problem, can you?
Let's put it this way:
Exactly.
they say they are. Like in the letter, right? It says that they're all losing money on League of Legends.
Right, yeah, and I think they're tunneling on the whole like sponsor revenue stream thing, as well as trying to like find ways to not even.
Oh, sorry, go for it. Sorry, no, go.
No, you're good. I think that, like kind of what we're talking about here, where there's not really like a need to get rid of relegation. It's just, I think like what esports is doing is that it's eyeballing, or at least the people in League of Legends are kind of eyeballing like the mainstream, the sports investors that are coming in, people that, have Echo Fox, Immortals, whatever, and they want a piece of that pie. They want some of that money to come in there. And, salaries have inflated to the point where some of these teams are operating, or most of the teams are operating at that loss. And so they're trying, rather than trying to either bring down the salaries, which you can't do that because the investors that are already in there are going to play those players more, and if you're not matching that, then your players aren't going to play for that team. So what they're trying to do here is they're trying to get a system to where those sponsors, and these sponsors are giving the reasons of why they're scared to invest in league. Like, what about relegation? That's like kind of the verbatim that's spewed about for the most part. So they're trying to get to secure that in order to handle those increased costs that have come about. Now, that being said, I think that tunneling in on like getting rid of the relegation system isn't like the solution to the problem, but rather it's just something that they're tunneling on because they're fixated on the sponsorship thing.
I don't think they're tunneling. I don't think it's fair to say that they're tunneling on it. I mean, like if you read the letter, if you like look at the the public discourse around Reggie's back and forth with Mark Merrill, like is relegation one major pain point? Absolutely. There's no way you could say otherwise. But revenue sharing is another huge part of the pie, right?
So I don't think that's another element of it. But the one thing I think is that they, rather than looking into trying to maybe improve the Challenger Series in some way, address some of the issues that are in there, which would take a lot of work, to say the least. Rather, it seems like it'd just be simpler to say, let's, get rid of that system so then we don't even have to think about it, rather than, have that system and improve it. Because the Challenger Series has been used by some teams, Cloud9, for example, as just like a LCS spot farming simulator for some extra cash, just because of how like the revenue currently is.
Yeah, but I don't. So my thing about I don't think the Challenger Series is a big pain point for LCS teams, right? It's not directly pertinent to their business, at least not moving to 2017. So from my perspective, look, they want more stability for their business, right? Anyone who says otherwise is being totally disingenuous. They want to be able to pay the players what they think the players are worth. They want to be able to invest in the infrastructure and brand growth they think is important for the long-term success of their business, right? And they want to do that without constantly having the fear that it's, all of that spend, all the investment they're willing to put in is just going to go away. Like the value that they've created for themselves is just going to go away overnight because they have a bad split, right? That's what they want. They want that level of stability, and the argument is that level of stability also has ancillary benefits for other people in the ecosystem, right? It's going to drive more viewership. It's going to create a better playing environment, better salaries, et cetera, for the players. You name it. And one part of this that we haven't gotten into that I'm actually really curious on your opinion on, Thooorin, is do you think part of this letter is that the teams just come out flat out and say we're undercompensated for the value we're providing? Do you think they are? Do you think the teams receive fair value from Riot Games for what they're bringing to the table, teams and players?
I don't think they do at the moment. Like, one of the big issues, which is, again, an area that isn't addressed in this is why I hate the fact it keeps getting made into esports. We have yet to even talk about esports. We talk about NA League of Legends for like 90% of the discussion as though that was esports. Now, why aren't teams in CSGO losing all their money? Because the circuit in CSGO, the way you make money off stickers, all these other aspects do not mean that you lose money. Even when you pay the player the same money, yet there are less viewers in CSGO. Bryce, how can that possibly be? Well, you know what? CSGO is on television. CSGO has 50 events a year. CSGO has 3 majors. There's all these aspects. Even online games where the teams sit in their bedroom and play in CSGO are exposure, not on the level of LCS, but guess what? They don't have the same costs as LCS. So the big problem here is, I agree, for the amount of viewership and the amount of revenue that League of Legends makes Riot, they are not even vaguely sharing any of that. Or here's the thing, I don't think they necessarily have to share it, but if you don't share it, at least do the honorable thing and allow the person opportunity to make it themselves. Because my problem in this scenario is, someone like Jack from Cloud9, so as far as I can tell, is within the esports space a fantastic businessman, but he has no extra opportunities to make more money. That's why that whole Mark Merrill thing was so egregious. He has no opportunity. He is already wringing blood out of a stone in League of Legends. Meanwhile, in another game, the one you critiqued him on for not going and spending his money, that's the one where he makes his money. That's the one paying for his here's kind of almost like the experiment of LCS, which they hope one day will make them the big money. That's obviously the case. That's why they don't just give up and go to CSGO and Overwatch, etc. Because they still hope one day LCS will be its own little MLB or NHL, and then they'll have their prime spot. And so I think that is an aspect which, even if it isn't directly informing all these decisions, it's like the attractor pulling all the conversations towards it. And that's why, for example, just as a brief digression, if you go and look what's happening in CSGO, they have formed something called the PEA, the Professional Esports Association. And this is literally, essentially, the same team owners we're talking about in NALCS trying to make their own little LCS, which they run to some degree, and directly revenue share on like a set dollar amount per year from the investors. So they're literally trying to make their own little LCS in CSGO that has no Riot in the way, filtering all the cash out. So I would agree. I think if you look at relative to other games, League of Legends teams do not get compensated correctly. My problem with that is obviously my corollary is not therefore remove relegation. That's the part I don't agree with.
Sure.
So here's the thing. In the financial enhancements segment in the ladder, it's also mentioned about skin revenue share and also Summoner Icon revenue share. So the thing is, in CSGO we have a lot of more opportunities. Thooorin, as you mentioned right now, what do you think would be a solution in this case? Because we're not talking only about the money you can make in-game for like providing your name, your brands to a character in-game, but also like should there be like any incentive from Riot to promote the jerseys or any kind of content from the actual team?
If Riot wanted to, Riot could probably already have LCS on television somewhere, have a marketing deal in place, have a broadcasting deal in place where it would have made some broadcasting rights and they would be sharing them with the players. Here is the dirty secret behind all LCS topics and why I hate League of Legends being talked about like it was all of esports. League of Legends is a game by a company called Riot Games. I mean, ignore the fact that they're owned by Tencent. Let's pretend it's still Riot Games, right? And what happens is they make billions and billions of dollars. Guess what? They don't plan on sharing that billions and millions of dollars with you because you didn't make League of Legends and you are not having anything to do directly with League of Legends Casual, which is the only way they, in theory, allow most of the money to come to them. So why would they share part of that? That's the problem. In football, there is no IP right by the person who made football. They do not. Therefore, there's just profits, and all the people who contribute to football being a sport make money from that. In League of Legends, the person who has the IP is actually Riot. They're the ones who sit on all the money. And so in this scenario, they literally, I mean, this might sound condescending, but they view League of Legends on the esports side as a marketing exhibitionary exercise to remind people that they have a really good game and that these are the new champions in it and that this is what really good players play like and therefore play ranked yourself, okay? That's about it. And so the problem is, in that scenario, why would they ever then unlock all the kingdom and make it like a real sport and allow everyone in and equal shares and revenue share? They wouldn't do that. They control it all in that sense. So the big problem there is no one in any of these scenarios is addressing that aspect. And so as long as we live in this fictional world where it's like the MLB and all the rest of it, yet there will never be a scenario like that as far as I can tell. Because why would they give up all the pie?
So let's address that. No, let me address that aspect, right? Because I think it's a really important distinction. So let's run through the other publishers. Okay. So Valve, obviously, totally different scenario, way more hands off with their esports, but they also view the direct financial benefit that esports has on their bottom line in a number of different ways, right? They do stickers and SIGs around the majors in CS:GO, and that generates significant income for Valve, but also for the teams and for the players. Sure. Okay. For the international, they do the compendium, which everyone talks about the $15 million that gets put into the compendium prize money, and kind of forgets the fact that Valve is keeping the lion's share of that money, and is while the prize pool goes up by $15 million, Valve $45 million in their back pocket, right? So that's an example where it's kind of a win-win, right? Like Valve is making money off esports. Esports are getting extra money made from through the publisher's platform. The publisher is able to contribute to esports in a meaningful and tangible way. We don't have a lot of details around the Overwatch League, but we do have an announcement that specifically mentions revenue sharing, right? So we've got Blizzard thinking through this exact same problem, this exact same scenario, and saying, we're going to view this a little bit differently, right? We don't know exactly how that's going to play out, and they probably don't know how it's going to play out either. But we know that the starting point for the Overwatch League is where it is the core fight. that is happening between Riot and that has been happening between Riot and the teams. So then you look at Riot Games, right? And you're right. They view it as a marketing exercise. I mean, when Overwatch comes out, you can't go on TNT or go anywhere on the internet without getting spam, or, go load a YouTube video without getting an Overwatch ad, right? Blizzard is spending millions and millions of dollars advertising the game. That never happened for League, right? There was never a big marketing blitz for League of Legends. There were never TV commercials for League of Legends, right? It just wasn't what they did. They view the LCS, League Esports more generally, as their marketing arm. But the problem with that is that, okay, so these people were doing your marketing for you. And maybe there was a point in time when they were being paid well to do that marketing, right?
Sure,
like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when the stipend first came into being, and you looked at them and said, Riot's making a couple $100 million a year. They're investing tons of money into building out the professionalism around League Esports, investing in the equipment, right? Hiring full-time casters and training them, all the good things that they've done, right? Okay, but that was five years ago. And so now here we are. Riot's projected to do $1.8 billion in revenue off of this game in 2016. I don't know exactly what percentage of that revenue was caused by esports. No one does. Maybe Riot does. Maybe Riot has studies back there that can reasonably quantify. I know it's more than zero, and I know it's less than 1.8 billion, right, in terms of value generated by not just in ALCS, right? But esports across the board in Korea and China and Europe, in SEA, so on and so forth, right? So we know there's value being generated there, and that's the conversation the teams are trying to have. It's we are being undercompensated for the value we're providing. Look at how esports are monetized by Valve, for example. There is a symbiotic relationship between a publisher and the teams and players where they can actually get fairly compensated for the value that they're creating for the game itself. And it's not what's happening right now.
So here's the thing. I would put two dynamics in play here as to why that isn't the case. Because again, logically, you would think if this was all about esports and the ecosystem, then League of Legends with the most viewers would have all these things. You would literally steal every good idea and put it into League, and now you'd be killing the whole game. No one would be able to compete with League of Legends. So why are the best owners, who are the best businessmen, complaining about where they are in League of Legends? Two obvious principles to me. One is that in scenarios where Riot could revenue share and create something like a compendium type scenario, if to them that would allow more leverage for teams and other people to then have a say over what happens, they literally think to themselves, cynically, I don't care about 50 million if it means I get to control everything. Which, I mean, that sounds crazy to you or I, but if they are making billions, maybe the 50 million is worth giving up to have complete control. And then the second one is, this will sound even more cynical, but this is how I actually think they do think. Why would I create a Cloud9 skin that'll make a lot of money, and I'll make some money, and you make and Cloud9 makes money? Why don't I just create a skin, and I'll make all the money, and Cloud9 will make none of the money? And you know what? The Cloud9 player still has to play with some skin in the game. Joke's on them, right? I mean, this is not the way anyone in League of Legends is going to talk. No one in LCS is going to talk this way, but these two principles, as far as I can tell, are the main reason why Riot doesn't embrace. That's the scenario, right? Again, if you stay in League of Legends, it is hard to find revenue-sharing models because none exist. But luckily, we don't have to only look at League of Legends. We can go, oh, look at all these other games where they all exist, and they choose not to bring them in. So, I mean, I don't have any sympathy for Riot on that one. I agree with the owners.
So
yeah, Riot has always shown that they've loved being a monopoly. Like ever since like the start of it, when you literally tell like other tournament organizers, if you want to host League of Legends, you can't host Dota 2, and other tournament organizers but Dota 2 makes us quite a bit of good money. We're not going to do that. So, and there it goes. And Riot has always wanted to stick to that system, and I think that's a place where teams and perhaps even the community itself isn't pressuring them enough, because at one point I feel like there is going to come a day in the next couple of years where Riot could potentially choke its own, hold too tightly to League of Legends and suffocate it, rather than let other people, other investors, other organizers, whatever, come in and help out with the scene, as well as share the revenue.
Well, I mean, the sad thing is, as far as I can tell, these changes will come, but only if they happen in the other esports first. Like, I think a big part of why Riot is doing things now is because of the threat of Overwatch and because of what's happened in CSGO. Unfortunately, this is where the community, I will never have any sympathy for the kind of cretins in the community who think that, see, why did you complain? Riot has done that thing that they said they would do 6 years after the fact. Yeah, well, guess what? They didn't. And in fact, there's even things behind the scenes that say Tencent has forced some of those big changes that we've had recently, that they has nothing to do with Riot Games.
Because Colin and I were discussing yesterday, and we came across the point that Tencent owns since December last year.
I actually think it was like August.
August? No, 100% was December last year. Was announced by Polygon in an article.
Oh no, I know what date I got.
Tencent owns 7% of Riot for 1 year basically now. And suddenly we have seen a bit of change, like less in the esports side of things, but in-game side of things. I mean, we're having a replay system now that's obviously towards esports. They announced a sandbox mode, and even though like those are not really big into the revenue share and also the league itself, but it's a little bit change of heart, and it came so suddenly.
It's not even a change of heart; it's a complete 180 from before.
Yeah,
we went from having conversations of we're never going to make those systems, we're not going to look at those systems, to suddenly, hey y'all, it's.
Do you think like is the pressure like finally starting to rise from Overwatch becoming a thing, and Cisco like growing as big as ever, and Dota still being like this huge major problem for Riot? And could this like be Tencent forcing those things, or is like, yeah, we definitely need to change the things now, then otherwise our owners, like our teams, are probably going away?
I mean, there's no doubt that Riot feels market pressure from other games and other expansion of esports, right? They want to continue to be the king of the hill. They want to have the highest level of viewership. How involved Tencent is in that, I mean, it would be pure speculation. I have no idea.
Yeah, same. It like the only thing to work off of is just like when Tencent took ownership, and then you contrast Riot's position on certain things like in-game features before and after Tencent acquired 100% ownership, without knowing like if Tencent has been sending emails to Riot, things like that. It's somewhat impossible to tell, but I think there's some plausibility to it.
Sure, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting circumstantial evidence, but it's
that's
far
all it
from
is.
conclusive. Yeah,
Riot have not shown themselves to be a company who gradually change their mind. They just double down on the same perspective over and over again until literally something forces them to. What's funny is some of the big changes have just been forced purely by journalism. Someone leaks a document. Someone has something that they've heard. Someone has someone off the record who's a source who says this is what's going on. And then what Riot does is like, they do their little dance, they pretend like it was never going to happen, but and we slightly changed it anyway. So in that scenario, you can never really know what's causing those things, but it would certainly be very suspicious if Riot, for no reason, just woke up one day and had some Road to Damascus conversion and decided, actually, we think the replays are really great now and we want a revenue share. Like, they have not shown, in fact, again, this is one of the things that I've never understood, is like, you look at the track record of how people behave and then try and ask yourself, what is the psychology informing that decision? And you're not going to get drastic changes unless, like I say, some life-changing event happened. And as a company, that obviously hasn't been the case. So things like this are the steps along the way to changing Riot's opinion. Because really, it's not their opinion that changes. They just say they did. They have the ultimate track record of they changed something because they have to. And then they say, you know what? It's really good that we did change it because we'd actually been thinking about changing it. And you know what? Yeah, we think it's better.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So basically, let's play a scenario out. The next huge step would actually be like a threat from the LCS team owners to actually bargain the league and just decide, right, we actually need those 5 changes here, and if those things do not happen, we're not showing up to play. Would if every 20 LCS teams would decide to do such kind of move, first, would this even be possible legally? And second, would this be like the needed step for Riot to make any changes towards the teams?
Legal possibility is one that I couldn't really comment on ethically.
Okay.
There's because it hinges on a lot of behind the scenes contracts between the parties that I have access to for attorney-client privilege reasons, so I just can't.
All right.
I happen to know that when they have lockouts in the NHL and the NBA, the people most eager to end the lockout are the players, because even though you see they have an $8 million contract, they have a $2 million house and a wife, and they have alimony they pay to someone else, and they have a kid, and they've got 5 Hummers. So as a result, even millionaire sportsmen desperately want the lockout to end so they can continue making their money. And so in the last NBA lockout, there was literally pressure by some of the best players to end the lockout as soon as possible so they could play again. Now, in that scenario, even waiting 3 months in that lockout might have gotten NBA players billions of dollars down the line because it was a fight between millionaires and billionaires. So even 0.5% increase was worth it for like 10, 20 years we're talking about of income here. But they were the ones that were pressuring to not do it. So if millionaire sportsmen can't handle 3 months of a lockout, I don't think that a team that's saying, I already don't have any revenue and I need to not be relegated, I don't think that team can somehow not play in LCS and then imagine that that Riot's going to be the one that's going to fold first. I mean, they could certainly try it. It would be a bold move. I just don't see why their leverage would be on their side in that scenario, you know.
Yeah. Plus, there's also the perspective of the players themselves. What happens to all the players on those teams that, you know, are potentially boycotted? Are those players suddenly just like not able to compete? Are they going to be given away to other teams that are willing to go into that system? That's like a whole ballpark of issues. If you're a team, and if the case is, okay, if you guys aren't going to participate in the LCS, Riot chooses to let other investors or whatever just fill up the rest of the slots, and then those teams, you know, reach out and say, hey, we have money to play these players. Suddenly, if you're the team owners there who are boycotting, you could be losing all of your star players that you've been acquiring over the past couple of years.
Also, I'm sure there must be some teams, maybe Bryce can speak to this, I'm sure there must be some teams now who have bonuses for winning matches. So if you do not allow me to compete and win the bonus, I could probably, as a player, you could take that team, I'm sure, to court for like denying opportunity or something, right?
Yeah. That would be tough because any player contract that's well written is going to look like an actor's contract that doesn't create an obligation to actually use the services. So I think you'd have trouble. If you're a player arguing that you have some implied right to play in the competition, so long as you were receiving the competition, like compensation.
It would at least create bad sentiment between the team and the player.
Of course, yeah. I mean, unless the players win on it, right? If the players said, "Yeah, we're ready to do this," right? Then that's totally different than the team saying, "Hey, no, we're not. We're going to contractually hold you out. Like, you know, we're going to continue to pay you. We're not breaching our contracts, and you're stuck. You're not going to."
Okay, but Bryce, isn't that an issue though? It is mainly the teams who want all these things. Most of the players, if Bjergsen makes 15k a month, I don't know that he is telling Reggie, oh, we've got to boycott, we've got to do all these things. I think he just says, is that what we're doing, Reginald? Sure thing, mate. You know? I think at the moment, I don't think the big deal is for them. It's the teams that need to get paid the revenue, which, by the way, I'm on side with.
It really depends on which player you're talking about. In my experience, some of the LCS vets are a little bit more keen on establishing some of these structural changes, right? They've been in the system for a little while, and they've kind of seen the impact that it has, and they think they're quite frankly that they're getting undercompensated, right, vis-a-vis Riot. Like, they think the teams, they see where their money's coming from proportionally, and they're like, this doesn't make any sense. Riot's making this amount off of us. Our teams are making nothing off of us, right? They're netting even, and I think I deserve more. So it totally depends, right? There's definitely not an organized player sentiment on that issue. At least not.
I mean, I will say, if you know some of the amounts that really big players in NA can make from streaming every month, not for themselves, because they get. What's funny about the streaming scenarios? This is another like complete house of cards that the public doesn't know about. The biggest streamers are mostly on teams. The team makes most of that money. The player makes some, and because it's so much more than he used to make as a solo streamer, he thinks he's making megabucks. He doesn't. The team makes megabucks, and he makes what is a very good salary. So in this kind of a world, if teams can make that much off one player streaming, how can Riot not be paying more in terms of revenue? Now at this point, the stipend's almost like a joke that they're still going like, and by the way, I do pay you a little stipend. It's like, well, mate, the amount that like Cutie Pie's making is way more than that stipend, and he's one person streaming on the same service you stream the whole league on. So
my favorite joke in esports is when Riot says they lose money off of esports. That's the real joke.
Good genius, Bryce. It's like, you know, that famous story where the guy who played Darth Vader, not the one who was the actor doing the voice, but the one who was the physical body. Famously, he never made very much money off Star Wars because they had him in on some deal where he would make a percentage of like the gross profit. But they were able to argue away that like all the marketing they did, which itself was millions and millions and billions, meant that there was no profit. So Star Wars, one of those profitable movies of all time, never made any profit, and he never made any money. That's just all you're doing there is shifting the goalposts. You know, like obviously no one who knows those numbers could ever say that you weren't making money. So yeah, I agree. That's just, unfortunately though, that shows you that Riot themselves are disingenuous because that's them waging war on the teams using the public.
Yes.
They're not trying to communicate to Cloud9 we don't make money off League because they know that no one knows that's true. Yes. They're just trying to create public sentiment. It's what's funny, okay, I'll tie this into the lockout analogy I gave for the NBA. So famously, what happens when there are lockouts is the people who are the the owners of these teams are billionaire businessmen. So they have the connections to get articles written about players saying, look how greedy these players are. You know, that player gets $10 million and he's holding out for this. You know, an implication being you make like 50,000 an office job. I think how greedy he must be. What they don't bother to mention is, well, the reason why that article's being written is a billionaire wants this millionaire guy to accept $1 million less so that he can make multi-millions more. So in this scenario, it's the same thing. It's like what happens is the power structure is actually using the public against in theory, the disenfranchised people. I mean, you can't really use that term too much when we talk about millionaires, but certainly not getting their value of what they would in free.
Look, at the end of the day, you should have rights to get what you're economically generating, or at least something close to it, right? It's the Kobe Bryant argument when people were saying, Kobe, you're so greedy, you're at the end of your career. Why don't you take a pay cut? And it's like, he sells out every game. They can be horrible, and he's generating literal hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and he's salary capped at whatever it was, $26 million a year. Why should he take a pay cut? He's already taking a pay cut. The salary cap gave him a pay cut, but the narrative around it was so shifted around like, oh my God, you're so greedy. Why do you need this money? It's like, because they're going to make this money off me tenfold. That's why I need this money.
Yeah. So basically, the point on there is like no one is under the impression that Riot loses money to esports. That's absolutely false. And that's
no one internal, but externally, absolutely. Every Reddit thread about this, there will still be some upvoted comment of cite to Waylon Roselle, we lose money on esports, and
that's also why it doesn't work, isn't it? For them to say we lose money, and I say, well, look, you could make money doing a compendium. Yes. I don't want to do that. Oh, cheers. Right?
E-League, which has a fraction of the viewership of the LCS, has sponsorships from Snickers and Buffalo Wild Wings and Arby's. Where are those sponsorships for the LCS? Where the media rights deals, right?
They've stopped those deals coming in.
My perspective on this is it feels like they've under-monetized the LCS in order to perpetuate this false narrative they lose money off of esports.
That's interesting. So basically, we came to the point where we know coming along the next solution would be what will Riot do in the end. We can't really change much. We can just speak it out loud and force a change. So basically, I want to summarize the whole discussion until this point is, and I want to know from everyone, what would be the next step for everyone working in League of Legends? What would be the optimal step for everyone?
There can't be an optimal step for everyone, right? That's impossible. There's too many divergent interests.
Yeah, like
so
even in the case of...
Riot would love to just sit and let this make the team ignore the team owners, hope that they go away, and everything just continues in the ecosystem as it currently stands. And the team owners want 100% of the media right. I mean, they don't actually. They're never. It would be totally unreasonable to ask for. They're not going to actually ask for 100%. But in a perfect world, they would say increase our stipends to $5 million a year and give us 100% of the media rights deals and give us a percentage of sponsorship sales to go against LCS and all this stuff, right? I mean, this is. Obviously, there's no way to make everyone get exactly what they want here, and the question is, can they find a way to meet in the middle?
So basically, it's going to be on the same. We'll keep the same thing all over again for the next year, for probably the next 2 years, until like Riot decides either we're franchising or not, and how we going to run the system.
Or you have to consider, remember, it's not just League of Legends. Maybe the Overwatch League takes off so much that all those people who would have invested in an LCS don't invest in an LCS. They buy a franchise in the Overwatch League. They pump all their millions in there. League of Legends maybe stays as a viewed game, so it's maybe successful viewing-wise, but the dirty secret in the industry is it doesn't make you much money, so people start to spend less, or they spend less relative to that game, and therefore Riot either has to change to try and combat that, or they just lose. I mean, that's a scenario as well that can very much play out.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the Overwatch League, because that would be the next one I want to talk about. And if I remember correctly, Monty mentioned in an interview that Blizzard invited a lot of investors to the Overwatch World Championship, and they had like a VIP area to see the games, and there were people explaining the game so they could see and understand why esports is a thing, why Overwatch could be the next big thing, etc., etc. And they announced, obviously, the Overwatch League, where they are gonna had some input, and people can basically buy their franchises in. So Blizzard just a step ahead of Riot in this regard, or it's just like
Blizzard is just Riot with less Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
They've still got Kool-Aid, but it's slightly less.
Slightly less.
So basically, one of the interesting points that I found in the document was that Riot wants to wait until 2018 to make a decision if they either gonna change the system, gonna keep the system, or do anything at all. I don't think it's a coincidence because probably in turn they knew the Blizzard Overwatch League might be coming anytime soon, and they were announced for 2017. And would there be a chance that Riot is just waiting to see what Overwatch is gonna do, what are the teams going to do, to see what they basically have to give up or to change so they can keep the LCS going?
I mean, the point is, like I said before, if no one is going to actually boycott, where is the pressure on Riot to do anything? So the only pressure, if they do not boycott, because by the way, if they boycott, then it has to be decided tomorrow. Either they just say, fuck all of you, I'm never giving you franchise, in which case the teams have to either play again or leave and be replaced by other teams, or they say, right, yeah, you win, here's something along the line towards franchising, right? That could make it happen tomorrow. So, by the way, that tells you that actually probably the teams aren't going to boycott. So then the only other thing that could force it is market pressures, which would be the Overwatch League. So I actually think in that sense, probably smart from Riot, if you just look from their perspective, wait and see, because then if the Overwatch League collapses in on itself and is a money pit and everyone loses everything, then you can go, haha, I was right all along, and then you still have your world and you're never forced to change. So I think that's actually reasonable from their perspective.
So, but do you think the Overwatch League could be a big failure?
I mean,
you're asking me whether people could invest millions and millions of dollars into a game that's brand new and not make money back off that or have the game grow. I think that could happen. Yeah, that's a possibility. If you want to lay me odds, I'll take the bet now. Just give me some good odds.
Yeah.
Gambling was open to IM Oakland. Let's
Thorin's got a hero. He's got a Heroes of the Storm team he wants to sell you.
Exactly. Yeah.
We've seen that before. Blizzard has a history of mismanaging, esports scenes here. The Storms, StarCraft 2 probably it could be another case. And I guess another element too that might be a part of it is with all these sort of outside sports people coming in, maybe some of them could kind of be like NRG, where they just don't put the right people, they don't understand how to manage the system, and so you get an overall worse climate. Now again, that's NRG so far seems to be well, I guess there's also Echo Fox too. But who knows how these sports teams are actually going to manage esports things. They could mess it up. They're not some golden idol that just knows how everything works. Esports is very much its own animal from traditional sports, and that's one thing that I worry about with some of the sports money coming in is if they bring in their opinions and they bring in it should be this way. But there's some things that esports can do that sports can't do, and I think an open circuit is one of those things, and I really do like the open circuit. It's fun to see tournaments take place over a weekend, see teams prepare for that, and you can do that because you're not subjecting players to these extreme physical conditions that you would see in a football game or an NBA game. You can't play multiple games in a day, a basketball, and have the players be physically healthy.
Well, there's nothing mutually exclusive about a franchise league and having open circuit competitions, right? There was the amount of international competition in League of Legends has gone down over the years, not because you can't have leagues and international competition, but because Riot has made the conscious choice that they don't want there to be a lot of international competition, and when they do, they want to be the ones to do it, right? So you wind up with a couple of IAMs, and then that's it, and they do their All-Stars and their MSI.
I mean, famously, they actually limit who is available for IEMs. They give you the teams, not the other way around. You can't just invite every team and have your mini worlds. They will purposely say you can have 4 teams here, and guess what? You must have 2 really bad teams that would never get into Worlds. That's the world they operate in. It is a bit gangster in that sense, right?
Yeah. And so I would, just from the way in which Overwatch has been rolled out, and some conversations I had with some folks over there, it seems to me like they are trying to learn from some of the things that Riot has done well, and then a lot of things they've done wrong. And so I'd be surprised if the league was structured in such a way as to cripple the amount of international competition of Overwatch. Right, yeah. I think they see that as a net positive. I think they like the international competition. I think that the fans like the competition. They want to create that. Could Overwatch fail? Of course Overwatch could fail. It's a new game. We have no idea how the ecosystem is going to come together, etc. They're making a totally different run at this than they have made at past esports, right? I mean, historically, Blizzard esports department was really small and was essentially a liaison between a bunch of third-party tournament organizers who were largely responsible for organizing the competitions around the game. Obviously, StarCraft is a notable exception here, and the relationships with Korea, etc. But this is for the first time Blizzard has hired a significant esports team in-house. They've got Nate Nanzer, who's running Overwatch esports on a day-to-day. You've got major corporate involvement, right? Like, it's not, Alex, you're talking about having a bunch of sports owners and significant investors and talking to them at BlizzCon. It's not really a secret. I mean, there are pictures of Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision, sitting in the front row with like Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, and a bunch of other traditional sports owners, right? So there is a level of corporate involvement in trying to create support behind Overwatch esports. I think it will be successful, but there's anyone who sits here and says Overwatch esports is gonna be bigger than League of Legends guaranteed is like, we just don't have enough information. There's no way to be that confident.
Here's a great reason as to why it is far from assured that the Overwatch League will succeed with its investment. If there really was a giant sports league that you could invest in now and one day make billions, would you really be going around the street going, does anyone know where the offices are of one of the teams that would be in that league? Like, I want to invest millions, but I just can't find the guy's number. Who is the guy? So I find it creepy as fuck that Blizzard is like playing some sort of mad matchmaking scenario where they're like, oh, you're a guy with millions of dollars. Here's a team who you might want to buy or get the players from. And like there's something right there that tells you there's a bit of fuckery going on. Like there should be, in a world where this person has millions and they're a massive up franchise, and they don't have access themselves to already a good team that they'd want to spot. So that in itself tells you that at the moment they're kind of like greasing the wheels and they're hoping it all goes super well. But at the moment, the reality of esports is that when we get to the point, the position where people invest millions and millions, it is a huge gamble. Now, the gamble has a massive payoff in 5 or 10 years. That's why you do the gamble. But that's exactly why this discussion is happening, because they think if they make it look like NFL and they have no relegation and they have all these things, that then it will make it seem safer because the guy coming in from the NFL goes, oh, I kind of know this world. This looks familiar to me. That's part of the reason for all of this. It's not even, that's why I've said so little of this has been proven. Like, think about it. If this is a $1 billion industry, where the fuck are all the studies? Where are the studies done to show how you get viewers, what makes viewers watch things, what makes viewers stop watching things? So here's a great example, Bryce. One of the things I have found to be the most egregious, probably like intellectual failing, is if people in the StarCraft 2 industry who parrot the line that Koreans winning tournaments makes people watch StarCraft 2 less. We have had hundreds of tournaments where every tournament organizer has the numbers for the matches that they had, for the tournament itself, for previous tournaments, for the next tournaments they're doing. Where are the studies? Why, if that was something that was a fact, would that not have been done in some sort of an academic study that you could just, by the way, you wouldn't even need like millions of dollars to get the study done. You could have somebody do it as their thesis for their degree, Never been done. Here's why I would suggest it is. I think a lot of that is guesswork and people don't want it to be nailed down because when it's nailed down, it's going to ruin their narrative, So I find it very suspicious that this is a $1 billion industry where we have no fucking numbers. I mean, Riot doesn't even have numbers to show you that it's a better product when they have LCS in this way over this way. They don't have better numbers to show you, oh, look, if we have a best of 2, that reduces viewership because someone leaves after game 1. Where are the numbers? Yeah. It's all fuckery. It's all just smoke and mirrors.
Riot definitely has those numbers. They're just not.
They won't reveal them though. Which
is
definitely not. Right, Bryce.
Yeah,
I've always said
totally.
this. Okay, here's my favorite thing about esports is that people never think ahead to when things will be going badly. So what they do is when your game's rising, you're waving your dick around all day long. Look, I'm making this. There's this many people watched it from this demographic in this region. The second you stop breaking those numbers down for me, mate, I know there's some fuckery going on. Yeah. You no longer want to tell me the reasons and brag about your numbers and where they're coming from and what sources. Now now all of a sudden the stats are shrinking. Now it's like, well, the total viewership of the whole game for monthly, like already you can see that you yourself have been betrayed by you last month when you were succeeding. You fucked yourself on this one, You never had to do that, but you were so naive. You thought you were going to succeed forever, and that's where you see the problem. So my big problem in esports is like even the people who are claiming they're just giving you the information are themselves. It's just like media manipulation going on there, They're not even telling you the numbers. And yet if it was so surefire that it would succeed in all these ways, like that would be the first thing you'd be telling the investors in the Overwatch League. Look at the viewership when you have a franchise and you do this, and look at, if you invest in these sorts of players, these are the kind of people who join your fan base. And here's the age demographic they're at, and this is the sort of merchandising they'll sell. That doesn't even exist.
Well, there's something to be said for the fact that the industry is still relatively young, right? And a lot of the data play comes. You can't have a successful data business until the industry itself is successful, because if the industry itself is not successful, no one's going to pay you for the freaking data, right? Which is how you monetize the business, is you create something that people actually want to buy from you so that it can be relevant information for, future business decision making. So I think we will get more. I mean, you've got the Newzoos and the super data research, although that's not the same type of data that we're talking about, right? But you've had companies that have developed relative levels of success in studying the esports ecosystem. I think you'll see more of that type of data play over time, right? But it's not, again, that comes after the industry itself is independently financially successful.
So basically, we have the situation in the Overwatch League that so far we know fairly less, and we mentioned the whole open circuit system. I want to talk about it a bit because since we don't know how successful the industry in the end is, because we don't have numbers, we don't have proof. Are there any measures like from the leagues and the ecosystems we have now that we could like get an approximate amount of measure which system has been more successful until right now?
No, the measure at the moment is look how much money's in my bank account and look how much is coming next month. It's a con game.
So we're basically done until we get numbers.
So, yeah, it's just...
No,
the funny thing is people don't know this, but because I don't know how much was actually said publicly, but as far as I'm aware, the Overwatch League is not going to be like LCS. It will be for part of the year like an LCS. It will be basically what people now want in League of Legends, which is have LCS part of the year, have an open system the other part of the year, best of both worlds, and allow people to compete in both. Because again, by the way, it also would not be as big a problem if LCS was franchised if there was a circuit for 4 to 5 months of DreamHacks and IEMs and MLGs, and some franchise teams played, some didn't, some other teams played, and therefore, guess what? If some teams then could exist outside of the LCS ecosystem, make money playing those tournaments, win, have viewership, that would also in some ways be a way to run the experiment of is the LCS system even good? I mean, they won't allow that to happen also for obvious reasons. Why would you ever allow someone to run an experiment to possibly prove that your system is wrong?
Definitely not.
Why would you?
So, but I mean, we have different games, we have different systems right now. So, I mean, we could try to measure on how good was our growth in the past year. I mean,
yeah. But I think this gets. I think it's just the debate that Thooorin and I were having like at the very beginning around. So when I asked this question about is the NBA markedly worse because it's franchise versus being some kind of open system or some promotion relegation, and he's right. You can't know. The best you can do is compare apples to oranges, right? You can compare the Premier League, EPL to the NBA, but it's totally different ecosystem, different fans, different sports, etc. So yeah, I mean, look, we could compare different esports, but I think there's too many outside variables that are impacting the analysis of what is better, and then again, how the hell do you define better?
So basically, if we can find out what's the best system,
there is no best system, right?
Yeah, there's the
That's
thing.
why, if you notice, nearly all of my arguments are not on this grand scale of is this thing good? Is it better? Will it be better? I always go to this. Tell me your problem. Once you have told me the problem, now we can look at some solutions. Don't tell me the problem, then tell me things that you want to change because you think they will be better for some other reason, Like, we can solve problems. That's something we can do. Like, tomorrow, we can try and find a solution that gets some more revenue for the LCS teams. Tomorrow, we can try and find a solution that helps build job security, all these different things they want. But you can't put out, like, 50 big problems and then go, here's, like, one solution, and do you agree that's better or worse? Like, that's no way to solve problems. That's politics.
At least not problems as complex.
Yeah. All right. So I want to end everything, like the whole discussion, because
don't kill yourself, mate.
This wasn't that bad of a show, man.
Esports can still make it. Don't worry.
I had a dream, No.
Listen, someday someone will franchise your show. You'll be able to get sponsors. It's all going to work out for you.
It's okay.
Hey, really?
You don't have to worry about it. You
Is
get
my show gonna
relegated
be
as host.
franchised? All right. No, I mean, I just wanted to actually sum it up and go actually to the beginning of the question. Is franchising the solution, like in long terms for League of Legends and probably other esports? Because there are people saying that there could be a future where in at least North America every esports could be turning into franchises, so that's the big money comes in. So because that's the system they know, but in Europe maybe we don't have the same. So it's like the solution people are trying to find right now for it a long-term decision or a short-term decision.
I mean, so I think if there's anything that we've proved throughout the conversation on the show, right, it's that it's an incredibly nuanced topic, and so saying whether it's good or bad, or whether it's short or long-term solution, there is no yes/no answer to that. I think the reality of the situation is that every esport is different, even the regions within the esports are different, right? And so, my answer to that question is the same as it was at the beginning, which is I think that the net benefits outweigh the net negatives associated with creating some kind of permanency in ALCS. And probably in EU LCS, though, there's interesting questions around. It is a different discussion because you have a different type of people, right? It's hard to pick out which team in the NALCS this coming into 2017 does not have the resources and professionalism to really create the type of environment that I think is necessary for long-term successful esports. So yeah, I think the net pros outweigh the net cons, but there's a lot of back and forth in there that we've covered in the last hour and a half.
Right.
I don't think there is an obvious, clear solution. I would just put it this way. On every single point you ever make to someone, especially when you try to argue a tangible basis, it's one thing, you can have a discussion with someone all day about whether or not Led Zeppelin's better than Lady Gaga, and someone can argue either side of that all day long and all nuance. But if you want that person to do something that will have a financial impact on people and that will limit other people's entry to something, then I would like you to prove that assertion with studies or numbers or give good reasoning. You can't just use spurious rhetoric to then show that that would be the case and then say things like it would be good for everyone in esports and then the most ridiculous, high scale, vague, nebulous terms, which, by the way, it's actually impossible to have anything that is good for everyone in esports. That cannot exist as far as I know, except being alive maybe. And even then, I'd argue not for some people.
Not in 2016.
So, Colin, do we want to also add something to this?
I think that there's a lot of different things that can be done for solutions to the problem. Again, kind of like Thooorin outlined, okay, tell me the problem here. Well, we're not making money out of these leagues. Okay, well then let's look into getting a proper revenue share system, because TSM, Cloud9, CLG, there are organizations that have helped to build up the LCS and make it what it is today. They've brought in their own fans and they've brought in a lot of viewers for that. So, they should be able to enjoy some of the money that Riot does make out of it. You'd have to be able to convince Riot, though, to give up some of the money that they're making, and that's a concession that Riot is going to have to make. And they're probably not going to be happy about that one, but if it keeps that particular scene going as well as sustainable, it can fix a lot of the problems. I think the franchising element of esports, at least because it's based around giving permanent slots, is more to get these investors to come into the scene that maybe it's too early for them to come into. I kind of wonder if it could be a situation in Beetlejuice, where there's the couple that owns the house, Alec Baldwin, I forget the lady's name in there. They like the house, but people are it's too big for you. Maybe another family should get that one, but they're perfectly fine with that one. But then they die, and then another family takes over the house, and they completely change how that goes. They change the infrastructure, they bring in their own wacky ideas, things like that. But ultimately, I think that there is revenue streams that can be accessed to that don't necessarily require the LCS format to change at all. There's some benefits to having relegation system as far as storylines for the bottom end of the leagues, as well as giving teams opportunities to come into the ecosystem. But it is something that's very complicated and nuanced. I do think that ultimately we have to focus, or the team should be focusing on getting Riot to open up revenue shares to solve the issue with them running in the red.
All right. So, I would like to give you guys the opportunity to have any shout-outs left. If you might start, Thooorin.
Don't really have anyone shout out to me and everyone else for doing whatever we do.
Perfect.
Bryce.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer. I don't have sponsors, so I got no shout-outs.
Maybe have friends and family that you could say hi, man.
Yeah, friends. Yeah. If my fiance made it to an hour and a half at the end of a show that she never started watching the beginning, hi, Adrian.
Yeah, listen, don't give up on Bryce just because of the way he is. This is just his public side. He's a good guy deep down, and He'll leave his work at work, okay? So just don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah,
about it.
I would say Thorin is too, but I'd be lying. You know what I mean?
Well, at least I'm killing it in my job.
Oh.
All right.
All
Colin.
still mates.
Colin?
So just thank you to the guests, for Bryce and for Thorin, for coming on. You guys did a lot for the discussion. I learned a lot today. It's my shout out.
All right. So also thank you both for coming and joining the discussion and sharing your thoughts and knowledge about the esports scene in general. So, and of course, if you like the show, be sure to check out our social media. I'm gonna be sending it here in the chat. Also follow our guests on Twitter. And I hope you guys also liked the show and enjoyed it, and also learned a lot about the esports and how maybe franchising could impact the scene and the whole discussion about it. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next show.